let's get back into Clarice. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create some airships or spaceships or transport vehicles for our concept. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to take the exact same kit bash pieces that I was using for my base buildings at the start, and I will utilize them again in order to make my spaceships. So the way we're going to go about this is quite simple. Let's grab one of these. Let's go with this one. I'm just going to make a copy, so I'm going to click Control C, and I'll go into the airships folder and click Control V to paste it. Next up, I'm gonna create a new geometry point cloud. And let me just change this to context, and we'll not disable, we'll hide it for now. Let's just hide all these objects. So in this point cloud, let's select our geometry and let's parent it to the geometry. And let's create 20 points. Okay, so now we have 20 points scattered all over this object. Let's create a new geometry. Nope, sorry, not geometry, just new scatter. And for geometry support, we'll use our point cloud. And let's rename these two. I'll call this airship 01 base and airship 01 point cloud and airship 01 scatter. And so we have our geometry support in the form of the point cloud, and let's add all of these tech pieces as geometries. And so now we instantly get a cool spaceship. And the really cool thing is that we can go into our point cloud and we can, for example, change our point count by 1, and this causes it to be completely recalculated into a new spaceship. So what we can do, for example, also is let's, for example, in our scatter, go into our geometry pieces, and if we don't like something, for example, if we don't like this piece or this piece, I mean based on just the individual geometries, we can, for example, actually we can find out which ones they are by the look of any of these geometries. For example, this, it stands out quite a lot. We can, for example, have our selection tool, and let's hold down Z and just click on it, and this will direct us to whichever kit bash piece it was. So it's 09. So let me go into my scatterer, and that's a cool trick. Whenever you hold down Z and click on any object within a scatterer, it leads you to it. So you can recognize an object if there seems to be a problem and eliminate it. So let us turn off 9. And now we have a completely different piece of geometry. So this is quite cool, and there are really infinite variations to this technique. You know, you can get a lot of cool stuff. And if, for example, you want to maybe mirror this, we can just take this and, you know, put it here if we want to create something like this, and then we can just instantiate the scatterer, and let's just, well, we could do scale to -1. Oh, whoops, we want to localize the scale and the translation. So here, let's just keep it to 1. And this way we can have something that is symmetrical. Then we could go in here and change something, and it'll change for both. So that's quite cool. And you can do a lot of different combinations using this technique. So feel free to create some spaceships of your own. Let me just put this into a context, and we'll call this Airship 1. And let's take all three of these and let's just combine them. So now we have an Airship 01 combiner, and so now we can take all of these and hide them, and our combiner represents the whole spaceship, and we can move it wherever we want in our scene. We can animate it, and this way we can have really infinite variations. If I then select one of my original scatterers, let's say here, or even my point cloud, even better, and change anything, my combiner will also change. So it's a very nice non-destructive way of working, and this way you can create a lot of these sort of vehicles very quickly. Alright, so have fun. Let's go to the next step. In my scene here, I have now placed my airships all throughout the layout, and I did that just by moving their combiners into place and keeping them all in a separate context within the geo folder. So my aim in terms of their composition was to add the main three in the foreground to be moving towards the focal point of the image, and then some smaller ones further away in the background as well, just to add some extra interest to those locations. So first of all, let's create some render passes with just the airships so we can bring them into Photoshop. Let's open our image view and let's go to the image. And here, let's zoom out a bit. And let's just take our environment light and let's duplicate this. And we're going to call it EnvLight Airships. And let's enable it. Let's change our geometries to a new group. Let's go into our airships context and let's just create a new group, and we're going to call it airships geo all. And in the inclusion rule, we will we will just put project scene geo airships and star for everything, but we will select our tech pieces and let's just add them to the exclusion rule, / and star. So now we have selected just our airships, and let's go again into our layer 3D here, and let's change the geometries to our new airships geo all group. And as you can see now, we have just the airships being rendered, and they are actually receiving the shadows from the rest of the environment, because the rest of the environment is still plugged into the shadows. If I were to change this to just our airships group, you can see now we are not having the environment shadows cast. So keep this as it was. Okay. And let's also do this for our distant light. Let's just disable this one. Okay. And actually, we can do it slightly quicker. For example, we can just select both of these. Well, first let's duplicate and rename them. So AO airships, AO, or rather Z airships, and let's just select both. And with both selected, we can change the geometries to just the airships. So now we are getting the depth, the ambient occlusion, which actually, let's have a look. Okay, so our ambient occlusion is currently not working, and that's because for the ambient occlusion, for the visibility, we also want to change the shadows to our new geometry group. And the depth works perfectly fine. So now we'll want to render these out and bring them into Photoshop. But before we do that, we are also going to create some textures for our spaceships. So let's just select our environment light layer and let's just duplicate it. And we're going to call this airships text 1. And let's disable this layer. And let's go into our shaders. And let's go into our shanties shaders. And let's just grab shanty 1 and shanty 2. And let's just click Ctrl+C to copy them. And we're going to create a new context here. And I'll call this airships within the shaders. And let's paste these two here and rename them. And within, let's also rename the materials, just so we don't get confused. And we are actually going to reuse the same textures that we used for all the shanties to save some time. And it will still give us nice results. So let me open the material editor. So currently these are still connected to the textures which are also being used for the shanties and the balconies. So I think I will want to take this textures folder and just copy this because I'll want to make some changes to these textures. I'll call this airships. And this goes from 1 to 11, it seems. So I want to bring these in because now these are different files than the ones you see here. If I do this, you see they're all different. And in my switch, I want to get rid of all these and add my copied ones. So these ones. And in our airships 2 mat, we need to take numbers 12 to, in the airships 12 to 16. And let's bring these here. And in the switch, let's get rid of all these and add our copied ones. Perfect. So now let's go to our render layer and let's override the material. Alright, so now we have these textures applied to the airships, but there is some problem with the texture, and that is because if we look here, The reason I copied these textures because previously we were applying them with the UV set as the projection mode. But we want to change this to cubic instead. And let me do the same for these ones, which we are currently seeing. Alright, so now these are being applied more correctly, but the tiling is the wrong size. So we'll go to UV scale and set this to 10. And this is how I tend to quickly create textures for spaceships and whatnot. And if we, for example, want to make a new set of these textures, we can, or a new combination of these textures in our switch node, we can just change the seed to any number and we'll get something different. So that's quite cool. So let's take this one and duplicate it, and we're going to call this airships text 2. And here we'll override the material with airships 2 matte. Which still needs these to be adjusted in terms of scale. So 10, 10. And now we have another set of these. And so you can create a lot of different combinations, and you can use much better textures and much better geometry and quickly give yourself all of these different materials to work with. And the cool thing is that you waste no time. You very quickly scatter this geometry to create spaceships that you would have taken, I don't know, hours to model by hand. And then you apply these textures equally quickly, and then you can bring this into your concept art and get very fast results. So, having said that, let's take all of our airships render passes and let's let them render to 100%, and let's save them all out and bring them into Photoshop. There we will integrate these into the scene and add some effects and work out the texturing. Okay, see you there.